Let's take a look at data sufficiency now. It's part of our quant section right now and makes up about 50% of it. But then going forward, it's going to be a part of data insights in GMAT Focus. Look, the questions are based on the same concepts, a number properties, arithmetic, algebra, etc. But the format is such that they can get a little tricky. So let's jump in. I like to think of data sufficiency questions as little puzzles. Say, I tell you that I'm thinking of a positive integer less than 10. What is that integer? N, say. Well, you won't be able to say what that integer is, right? There are 9 different values possible. So I say, what is n? I have given you some information. I'm saying that I'm thinking of a number n, a positive integer n, which is less than 10. So I've given you some data. I've said that it is a positive integer. So that is why our options vary from 1 to 9, right? Because I've told you that n is less than 10. Now, what is n? You don't really have the answer to that. N could take any of these values. All right. So then I give you a clue. I say, okay, I'll give you a clue. My clue is that n is, let's say, greater than 5. Now, can you tell me what is n? Again, you would say that that clue is not sufficient to give the value of n because n can still take 4 different values. What are these 4 different values? It can still be 6, 7, 8, or 9, right? So then you say, okay, this is not sufficient. I cannot tell you the answer based on this data. Okay, so then I say, okay, then forget clue 1. I'll give you another clue. The clue 2 is that n is, let's say, less than 7. Now, remember, this is an independent clue, right? Of course, it is the part of the same puzzle, but I have to ignore the clue 1 for the time being, and I have to only focus on clue 2. So then I say it is less than 7. Now, again, there are 8 different values that are possible, right? You'll say it could be 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever, till 6. So again, you cannot give the value of n. All right. So then you would say this is not sufficient either. So then I say, all right, why don't you try to use the data of both the clues together and then tell me what the answer is, what is n? So now you use both together and you say, all right, so n is greater than 5 and n is less than 7. Here the options were 6, 7, 8, 9. Here the options were 1, 2, 3, up to 6. So the only number, positive integer, satisfies both these clues is our number 6. Right, so then you say, all right, now I know that n is equal to 6 because only n equal to 6 satisfies both the clues. And this is what a data sufficiency question is. Now I would say that clue 1 and clue together are sufficient. Right? So it is just like a puzzle. Here I'll give you the context, some data of the puzzle. I'll give you a question. All right, so what is this? Or is this equal to that? And then I'll give you 2 clues. First, you try to figure out whether each independently is enough. And if they are both independently not enough, then you look at them together and then say whether your the information given in the 2 clues is sufficient now. So then one thing I can say for sure is that the 2 clues cannot give me contradictory information, right? So for example, is it possible that my clue 1 says that n is greater than 5 and my clue 2 says that n is less than 2? Is this possible? Look, there is only one value of n that I have in mind. I have told you that I'm thinking of a number n. This is a positive integer n, right? So then n has to have one unique value. So then n cannot be greater than 5 and less than 2 at the same time. So that is why the 2 clues, the 2 statements in the data sufficiency question, they cannot give me contradictory information, right? Okay. So always think of a data sufficiency question as a puzzle. It becomes a whole lot easier to understand than what is going on. So this is what the structure of our data sufficiency question is. There is a question stem. So in our example over here, our question stem says that n is a positive integer which is less than 10. And the question is, what is n? Right? This is our question that we have to answer. Now, data of statement 1 was n is greater than 5. This is my clue 1, or I can call it my statement 1. And of the second statement was n is less than 7. So data of statement 2. So first I will review the data of this statement alone, or I could review of this alone in case statement 2 seems easier. Then I'll find out whether now I can answer the question. Look, when I say answer the question, when I say what is n, n must have a unique value, a single value. You cannot tell me that n could be either 6 or 7 or 8 or 9. That's not an answer. The answer to what is n is a single value only, one unique value. So then you say, okay, there are, that I have 4 values. So that is why I do not have a unique value. So then this one is not sufficient. All right. What about when you say n is less than 7? Again, you say that there are 6 different values that n can take as per this statement alone. So this is also not sufficient. All right. So then when I put them together, then I see that I'm getting a single value of n, which is n is equal to 6. And that is why it becomes sufficient. For example, if my data of statement 2 instead of n less than 7 were n is less than 8, then this would give me values 1 to 7. And then by using both the statements together also, I would say n greater than 5 means 6, 7, 8 or 9, 4 possible values, and n less than 8 would give me 1 to 8 values. And that is why there would be n 1 to 7 values. And then that means there would be 2 values which are common. I would still get that n could be 6 or 7. As per both the statements, n could be 6 or 7, and that is why, again, then this would be not sufficient. As I said, I must get a unique value for n to be able to say that I have got the answer, to be able to say that this is sufficient. Okay. Now, each data sufficiency question will have these 5 options and you'll have to select one of them. Let's review each option. It says statement 1 alone is sufficient, but statement 2 alone is not sufficient. So A, when let's say review the data of statement 1 and I see that this is sufficient, then I'll review the data of statement 2 and let's say I find that this is not sufficient. If this happens, then my answer is A. A means 1 alone is sufficient, but 2 alone is not. Now, if I see that my data of statement 1 alone is not sufficient, but of data 2 alone is sufficient, if this is NS and this is sufficient, then my answer would be B. B says statement 2 alone is sufficient, but statement 1 alone is not sufficient. Now, if either one of the statements alone is sufficient and the other is not, I get my answer as either A or B. If both alone are sufficient, independently they are both sufficient, then my answer is D, that each statement alone is sufficient. Now, what happens if neither statement alone is sufficient? What will we do next then? We will check whether both together are sufficient. Like over here, we check whether clue 1 and clue 2 together are sufficient because we found that neither clue is sufficient alone. So we checked, we put them together, we put their data together and then saw whether it is sufficient now. If we find that with the data of statement 1 and statement 2 together, we get a unique answer that they are sufficient, then our answer becomes C. C is that both statements together are sufficient, but neither statement alone is sufficient. And then even after putting them both together, if we do not get a unique answer, like over here, you see 6 and 7, here we got 2 possible answers, 6 and 7. So then the answer would be E. We'll mark E as the answer, which is statement 1 and 2 together are not sufficient. So then what is the process that we follow while working on a data sufficiency question? We first read the question stem, we figure out what it is asking, then we review the data of statement 1, we find out whether it is sufficient or not sufficient. We find out whether it is sufficient or not sufficient. Let's say this is my statement 1. Then we review statement 2. We have to review statement 2 also, even if it comes out sufficient, even if statement 1 is sufficient. Both statements have to be reviewed independently. This is like having two small questions in one question. Both have to be solved. So then again, we find out the sufficiency versus the not sufficiency of statement 2. Now we are ready to, once we do this, then we are ready to, figure out whether three of the 5 options are possible. All right. So in case, let's say we get this is sufficient and this is not sufficient, then answer A, statement 1 alone is sufficient, 2 is not. If we find out that this is not sufficient, but this is sufficient, then my answer is B. That is statement 2 alone is sufficient, but 1 is not. Then if I find out that each statement alone is sufficient, this and this both, then my answer is D, that each statement alone is sufficient. If I find out that neither statement alone is sufficient, then I go on and to another step. Now I have to check that when I put the data together of both of them, is it sufficient or not sufficient? If it is sufficient, then my answer is C, and if it is not sufficient, then my answer is E. So just ensure that you review each statement independently first. After you review statement 1, go back to the question stem to take a look at it once again and come back to statement 2. Why? Because you do need to wipe out the data that is there in statement 1, because we have a tendency to take that data forward and use it in statement 2 also unknowingly. But statement 2 has to be evaluated independent of statement 1 first. So that is why, if you feel like, you can just review the question stem once again to just, to reset in your mind what exactly is given in the question stem that you can use while reviewing statement 2, and then review statement 2 independently. All right. Now, there are 2 types of question stems that are possible. So here we said, what is N? This was our question stem. We were asking for a value of a certain unknown. So our one type is, what is the value of X? So it can ask for the value of an unknown. Please remember, I'm telling you again and again, this needs to be a unique value. If let's say if I get a quadratic and there are 2 values that I get out of the quadratic for X, I cannot say that it is sufficient to give me the value of X, because I got 2 values. I only have to have a single unique value. Only then is the sufficiency condition met. The other type of question stem could be, is X equal to this? Now, instead of putting what is N, what if my question were, is N equal to 7? I could have asked you this instead of what is N. So this is my second type of question stem. Is N equal to 7? Now, my statement 1 gives me N is greater than 5. So N could be 6, 7, 8, or 9. So statement 1 would still not be sufficient. I have to answer this as a yes or a no. So my answer over here has to be an emphatic yes or a no. Is X, if I say is N equal to 7, you have to say yes, it is equal to 7, or no, it is not equal to 7, in case you see that N is taking another value. If you say maybe, N may be equal to 7, because that's what statement 1 gives us. Statement 1 says N is greater than 5. So I know N is greater than 5. I know that N is less than 10. N may be 7. It could be 6, 7, 8, or 9. 7 is a possibility. So if it is a maybe, then that means it is not sufficient. Then it is not sufficient. All right. Now, what about statement 2? Statement 2 says N is less than 7. Now I know that n is not equal to 7. I know for sure that it is less than 7. Then statement 2 alone is enough to tell me that n is not equal to 7. What exactly the value of n is, I don't care anymore. Why? Because my question is n equal to 7 or not? My question is not what is n. So if n is not equal to 7, I know because it is less than 7, then my statement 2 here is sufficient. It tells me that n is not equal to 7. And that is why my answer over here would be B. Why? Because when my statement 2 alone is sufficient and statement 1 alone is not sufficient, then the answer is B. So remember, when I have this type of question, is so and so equal to so, as in a question that I have to answer in a yes or a no, I don't have to give the actual value, only a yes or a no. Then I have my sufficiency condition would be met if I answer with a yes or a no. The moment I say possible or maybe, then that means it is not sufficient. So think of data sufficiency questions as a puzzle. The puzzle asks you, say, for example, what is X? Now, the two statements given to us, they are like two clues. So one statement might be sufficient, or the other might be sufficient, or both together might be enough, or neither, even together they may not be enough. So now, will the two clues contradict each other? Think about it. They give you the answer to the same question. They cannot contradict each other.